Hey everyone, CrossFlux and BrokenIdeas here with a review of an upcoming project. Today we're talking about Afterimage, an upcoming metroidvania developed by Netera. We backed their kickstarter that they had up last year, so we've been granted access to their beta. It looks quite promising. The art, the story, and the characters and the gameplay all look really good on the surface. So let's take a closer look and see if it will really live up to our expectations.
First up, let's look at the story. Honestly, it's a little difficult to piece together everything that's happening here. Personally, I feel the English localization could be a bit better, or I could be an idiot. Either is equally likely. From what I can gather, in the world of Engarden, when people die, their souls go to some place where I think they are eventually reincarnated. There's also Goliaths over certain elements, and it's not really clear if they're gods or simply powerful embodiment of the elements. I'm not sure about the larger powers in place in the world, like governments and nations, but we do see 2 towns in the beta. The story opens on the main protagonist, Renee, and her partner, Ifri. While they're out dealing with threats to their village, their hometown had been wiped out, including their mentor. Renee then goes to search for answers, following their only clue, a mysterious cloaked woman. The story seems to set the tone of the journey, and does a decent job at establishing motivations and personalities of the characters in play. It also leaves a lot open, so I'm interested to see where it goes.
Speaking of characters, starting with the main protagonist, Renee, currently she seems a little bland, but she has just enough personality to connect with her a bit. I'm not sure who voices her, but to me it sounds like Erica Mendez, the voice of Retsuko from Agretsuko, and Ayaka from Genshin Impact. The line deliveries are a little awkward to me. It sounds like the VAs are just reading from a script and don't have much direction or context of which the lines should be delivered. It is passable though, nothing awful. Going back to Renee, we find that she is a responsible and capable young woman who is skilled in a variety of martial weapons. I'm not sure if her mentor was teaching her magic or religious things, but she seems to be a priestess, I guess that would be the word for it. She's loyal and caring, but not rash. Ifri's got a bit of sass, and I don't know if it's a fairy or what, but it's kinda cute. It hasn't done much in the story yet, but hopefully it'll come into its own more as the game progresses. I think Ifri is voiced by Ashley Biskey. It's a new VA I recognize from Genshin Impact as Layla, as I remember searching for the voice actors and coming across her Twitter saying that she was the voice of Ifri in this game. These are the only 2 characters that we get to see a ton of. The rest are either bosses or just NPCs. These NPCs have a good amount of personality and each give a little insight into the world of Engarden as well. And here's a truly remarkable aspect to this game. The art. The game has this beautiful painted look, giving all the environments and characters this really dreamlike and whimsical feel. It's hard to come up with a lot to say other than it's just really pretty to look at. There are several environments on display in this beta, and they all feel very unique, from caves to forests to a dainty little town, mysterious ruins. And from the sound department, you also have a lot of good stuff here. Sound effects feel nice and crisp. None of them are annoying. Everything feels like it belongs in this world and it helps you feel immersed, and it's all very good quality. Nothing too crackly or cheap sounding. The music isn't super memorable to me so far, but it's nothing bad. Again, it's kind of ambient, and you almost want to stop paying attention to it as you get drawn into the gameplay, which is exactly what ambient music should do, in my opinion.
Alright, here's the meat and taters. If you've seen our previous reviews of Nine Souls, then you should know that we can come across as a bit harsh when it comes to gameplay and 2D platformers, especially metroidvanias. So we'll do our best to properly explain our stance. Let's just cover what gameplay is like in Afterimage, and then we'll talk about what we liked and didn't like. First of all, as a platformer, Afterimage is a bit bland. The level design is a bit reminiscent of Ori. This means that navigating Engarden comes down to moving and jumping. When it comes to special techniques to assist in this process, Renee only has one, a dash, which you'll unlock only a little while into the game. She does also get a slide towards the end, but it's functionally equivalent to a dash. She doesn't have a double jump or wall jump or anything fancy like that, so the platforming feels a bit stale. Not only that, but the level design doesn't feel great to me. Platforms are just spread far enough apart that you can barely make a jump if you time it perfectly. As a result, it's hard to get into a rhythm, especially when backtracking or even making progress.
Though I will say that the dash does feel nice. It covers a decent distance and has a very short cooldown. You can even use it in the air, albeit only once per jump. The problem I have with the dash is that you're not invincible during it. This is a problem when all of the enemies possess contact damage. Perhaps you'd have too many iframes if you could spam the dash, but there are several solutions to this. Netera could implement the invincibility part of the dash to be on its own separate cooldown, like the Shade, Cloak, and Hallowed is, or they could reduce the speed at which the dash can be used. I normally don't like this kind of solution, but since combat is a bit slower in this game, I don't think players would notice this too much.
As for combat, Renee can use a multitude of weapon types, but they all function nearly identically. Sure, they each have their own hitboxes and speed, but for the most part, they all just hit a distance in front of her. She cannot aim any of her attacks, either above or below her, so that makes hitting enemies at a different elevation to you a bit cumbersome. You can definitely feel the influence of Castlevania. Besides that, the only other method of attack at Renee's disposal is a simple ranged spell that you obtain towards the latter portion of the beta. And this thing is broken. Not only does it do more damage than your melee attacks, but it can be spammed without consuming any sort of resource like MP, which is really strange since MP is a thing in this game. There's just nothing that really utilizes it yet. Once you get the spellbook, you hardly ever have to use your weapons. You end up feeling more like Samus at that point. The only problem is that the spellbook can't be used in the air, so Renee still suffers with the problem of dealing with enemies above or below her. Normally in games like this, where your primary form of combat is through melee, a ranged option has a massive drawback, like it consumes a valuable resource or has a longer cooldown. I think the combat in Afterimage could really benefit from this mindset. As it is, the enemies are easily exploitable. They're glorified damage sponges that serve to grant Renee experience so she can expand her talent tree. And to demonstrate this, there's one particular spawn in the graveyard-ish area. I don't really know what it is, but it's really tough, can easily one-shot you, and you can kind of just kill it off screen with your fireball before it's even a threat, and this is kind of how I grinded experience.
Speaking of, the talent tree is how you build Renee through her level ups. It looks a bit like the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X. Yay. Here you can distribute stat points, making Renee stronger in various areas, or teaching her new techniques. Honestly, none of these techniques are even that great. Sure, they look cool and flashy, but they're all too highly situational to get any real use out of them. Before I finish, I should mention something about the bosses. The first one that grants you the dash isn't really tough at all, but the second one, against some sort of angel lady, is actually quite tough. It took us a couple tries to beat her. Ultimately, it came down to memorizing her pattern, like most bosses and platformers, but her pattern changes as she gets lower on health. But the problem is there's not any conveyance as to when she changes to her more difficult patterns. You just have to kind of know she's going to do those instead. I think either her HP bar should change color, or there should be a brief little animation cutscene indicating that the fight has progressed to its second stage.
Overall, I'm not quite as happy with the way the game is turning out as I thought I'd be when I first backed it. But to be fair, that's mostly because it's closer to Castlevania than it is to Metroid. Like with some JRPGs where levels really make all the difference in whether or not you can complete a challenge, I get the same feeling when playing this game. Some enemies are really easy, while others are quite tanky and can suddenly kill you from out of nowhere. I feel the platforming elements aren't quite refined enough for me. Combat is clearly the larger focus here, which makes the whole nature of needing to gain levels more disconcerting. If combat is the main draw of gameplay, then shouldn't levels not even really be a thing? Why not let the player's own skill be the level cap of encounters? I suppose there's a little more to it than that, since gaining levels is the incentive for exploring every nook and cranny. And that way it's not technically dissimilar to Hollow Knight. I just hope that they add more incentives like obtaining hidden lore and finding secrets.
Despite our criticisms, Afterimage is not a terrible game. It's not even a mediocre game. It has a solid foundation, and the developers clearly have a focused vision on what they want the game to be. Although it may not be entirely our cup of tea, we respect what they've made, and we're still looking forward to the full release. We're eager to see how much more polish they can add and any other surprises they might have in store for us that weren't in this beta. They've already done a fantastic job, and you should all check out the demo and play it for yourself.
Until next time, have a blessed day.